Hey, Luke! Do you want to go on a bike ride? Never mind, it's like 110 degrees outside. All right, so this is Flamme Rouge. Just basically going to go over the rules on this thing because they're pretty simple. And I'm going to start off with the board here. The board is set up in a way that follows this card. And there's a bunch of these cards in the box right off the bat that are going to give you a bunch of different board setups. And they're each a little bit different, pretty fun. It's mostly that there's just aesthetically different looking because laning in this game is very different than most racing games. So there's not really great ways to block in this game. It's more like the lanes kind of keep track of first person to a square and second person to a square. More on that later. So it's a lot of aesthetics. But then the other thing that really does matter in this game, the aesthetics do matter for sure because it just, you get a feel for a bike race. But then these blue and red squares that you can kind of see down there, I'm going to get into those in a second. Those really, the placement of those is really what makes every stage a lot different in the base game here. Now, each player also has a deck, two decks, and a player board. And there are these distinguished gentlemen that are going to be in the middle of your board. The distinguished gentlemen with their lovely mustaches. And they're going to be basically representing two different type of bikers. And I mean, this is really analogous to like the fact that there are special roles on cycling teams. There is the sprinter. I am totally an American who does not have an ounce of French classes or French accent in my body, so bear with me. Then there's the rouleur. The rouleur is like the more consistent of the two. He's going to just constantly be doing things like where he is able to just go like at a pretty consistent tick. He's not ever going to be quite as fast as the sprinter, but he's going to be able to just constantly have endurance to keep going. The sprinter is going to be able to burst and go really fast in certain segments of the race when the cards come up for him that he needs. So the distribution of the cards is right here. You can see that the sprinter has 2s in his deck, and he has 9s. So the distribution is wider, but overall lower, really. I mean, and then the rouleur he's just a consistent biker. He's just constant in his ability to push forward and win. And so the first few times I played this, I thought for sure I was going to try and keep my sprinter up with the rouleur. And the rouleur was going to be my windbreak and get the exhaustion cards. And then at the very end, I was going to play a 9 or 2, and he would just sprint into the end and win. And that does work sometimes, but the rouleur is going to win the race quite a bit too. I mean, he's a good, steady biker, and so you can't really discard the fact that he's just a good, steady biker. So that's their basic starting deck, and as we get into the game a little more, you're going to understand that will get modified. It will be different, and basically what's going to happen is they're going to become exhausted and tired. So this is their baseline fitness. They get tired over the course of a game. Here are the bikers in their starting positions, and that's the thing that seems weird the first time you play this game, is you feel like, man, that's not fair. Like, why are we putting both of our cyclists out at the same time? And so this game, this hypothetical game that I'm setting up, I would assume that Blue is the first player to put his out, and this is the first time he's played. Because being in the front at the beginning of the game isn't an advantage at all. As we see the game develop and play, you'll see why. Really, probably red and green are the ones who played quite a bit. And then black might have been the last player, and he was just kind of stuck with his position and placement. But what's going to happen over the course of the game is that we're going to play down some cards, and we're going to move across the track, and then we're going to resolve how the movement works. So there are basically 3 phases in the game. The first phase is going to be the energy phase, where we draw 4 cards. So I draw 4 cards. I pick one of these cards. Let's say I want to go this many, 4 to start with. The rest of them go face up on the bottom of my deck because I'm going to recycle those cards, but I want to know they've been used, so I put them face up. So my cyclist is going to go 4 spaces, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the other deck. This is my sprinter deck. I'll do the same thing with my rouleur deck, and I would end up with having 2 movement cards. And so I would move my sprinter 4, My rule are 4. And then we're going to end up with packs and movement that is going to resolve. And it's really neat how these cards work out. Basically, you can't have people stacking up on top of each other, but you can have people passing each other during this phase. And you can have people get blocked, actually, too. So if there's 2 cyclists, they can block a little bit, but blocking is not nearly as fundamental in this game as it is in other racing games. So a concept that needs to be talked about in this game to really understand it is the idea of lanes and squares. So squares are the bigger square. That is a square. A lane is half of that. So when you move up, you're moving up squares, okay? Not lanes. So that's a way to think about it. So if I had this biker here and he moved up, let's say he moved up 4. He would go up 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 squares. And then he automatically defaults, if he's the first cyclist to go there, he defaults to going on the right side of the square. That's his lane assignment. And when you're on the right side of a lane, you're considered to be in the lead of that square. So then let's say the black cyclist here went up 3. 1, 2, 3. Well, he's second to go there, so he goes on the outside on the left there. And then if this person's going to go 2, well, they're blocked now. They can't get past them. But if they went 4 or 3, even 1, 2, 3, they could pass them. So basically you're able to pass people, but you can't stop in the same square as them if the lanes are full. So that's kind of just how the movement works and resolves. Okay, now we're going to get into the really cool stuff, the slipstreaming. And this is where this game pays homage really to the importance of slipstreaming in cycling. And I did cycling some in my 20s, and I understand this better than maybe the average person, but I don't totally get it. So basically what's going to happen, though, is that packs of cyclists happen. So if you ever watched the Tour de France, it definitely happens where people, they kind of take turns being in the lead because you're breaking the wind for everybody else. That sounded funnier than it was supposed to, I think. But basically you're going to, like be the person who's in the lead and you have to fight the wind really hard. And it wears you out to fight the wind. And that's in real cycling and that's in this game as well. So what's going to happen, though, is we're going to resolve these packs because if there is someone breaking the wind for them, they're able to make more progress than the people out in the lead because they're fighting the wind more. So starting at the back, if there's one space in front of someone, you move them up into a pack. And now we have a bigger pack there. But then also this pack is only 1 away from this guy. So they move up on him. So this is like kind of a cool thematic thing. But as far as making a tense board game goes, this is something that keeps the game very close and very tight. And really ideally, until the very last stretch, you want to be getting those free spaces. And you don't necessarily want to be out in front. Because when you're out in front, you become exhausted. And you become exhausted when you're the front of a pack. And a pack front person is basically anyone who's considered to have 2 spaces in front of them. So even though this guy was way out in front at the beginning of this, he's now very close to the rest of the pack, and he's going to have to take an exhaustion card. And this guy back here is in real trouble because he's so far back. Now, he wasn't that far back. He was only 2 spaces back to start this, but now he is way back there. And he is fighting for himself. He has no one to help slipstream with him, and he's going to become very, very exhausted very quickly. When you end up becoming exhausted because you aren't a part of a pack, you have to take one of these cards into your hand. And it reminds me in like deck building games of when you get like a curse or something bad that just bloats your deck and makes it so the cards don't cycle the way you want and you have a bad card in your hand. And these are 2 movement cards. They're terrible. 2 movement is the worst. And they basically just bloat your deck up and make it worse. And you are going to have a hard time burning those out. There's ways that you can burn them out, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But basically these cards, they have essentially a piece of art on there that looks like me on a bike. And you go really, really slow. So that's what happens when you become exhausted. Now, one way you can get rid of exhaustion cards is like this. Basically there's hills, there's climbs, and there's climbs, and there are declines on certain stages, on most stages. And that's really what makes this game a lot of fun, is because that gives you an opportunity to burn one of those exhaustion cards up there. So this guy here, this roller, I'm going to assume that he's been in the lead for quite a while. Okay. No one's overtaken him. And really where you want to help your friend out is by maybe having your sprinter take a turn and get some of those exhaustion cards too. That's why you have 2 cyclists. But let's just say that the sprinter has just gotten a ton, or the roller has gotten just a ton of exhaustion cards in there. And so he's cycled some around, and he's in this stretch right here that's got kind of a blue shading to it, but it also has this number 5 next to it. So the neat thing about that is we're going down a hill, and so this is a chance for that guy who's exhausted to maybe take it easy a little bit, maybe just coast down this hill and get some good speed going, but also to just rest his legs a little bit. So on this, he's basically going to take this 2 card, that exhaustion card, and he's just going to basically allow that to have him roll just down the hill. And that 2 becomes a 5. So the minimum movement when you start on the downside of a hill is 5. But if we look on this, for every time that we go down a hill, we've got to go up a hill as well. And so when you go up a hill, the maximum movement you can have is 5. So that 2 would still only move you 2. And a 3 would still only move you 3. And a 4 would only move you 5. Or 4, and a 5/5. But if you played a 9, or if you got like a really unlucky hand with your roller, and you got 6s and 7s, and you had to burn one of those 7s, you're only going to go 5. This game almost has a feel of like a co-op game because we're using that slipstream so much in the pack. It feels like we're cooperating and playing nice with each other until we see this finish line, and then our distinguished gentlemen have a change in their baseline behaviors. And now it's a mad dash. We see who has the biggest cards left. We try and dash across this finish line. And the way how this works is the first person to cross the finish line wins if only one person crosses the finish line. But because of slipstreaming and the way how these packs works, that almost never occurs. That almost never happens that way because people save their biggest cards for the end of the game. And basically, whoever has come the furthest across the finish line is our winner, with the player on the right side of the lane winning ties. And that's how the game finishes. This exercise in gentlemanly slipstreaming becomes a free-for-all dash at the end. And that excitement is very, very intense and very cool. So, Flamme Rouge, that's roughly how you play the game. One rule I did not cover that I'm definitely going to tell you I missed, I didn't get it, was that once you use a card during the energy phase and it's actually used for movement, it goes out of the game. So not only are you weeding out those exhaustion cards, you're also weeding out those like 9 value cards that you could get with the Sprinter. And so once a card gets used, it's just out of the game. The cards that you didn't use out of the hand of 4 that you drew, those get cycled back in. So you'll use every card once, basically. And actually, depending on how many exhaustion cards you get, that's pretty close to true. So that's a rule that I didn't quite get covered. But let's get to the basics of like what I think about this game now. So here at Boardgame Mechanics, I kind of try and do these kind of highlights. And then if I have any lowlights, I'll give them to you here. And then I try and categorize my rankings and give you kind of an idea of what my thoughts are on it. And I guess we'll just do that now. The highlights, the art in this game is super appealing. I love the old-fashioned, old-timey, turn-of-the-century France-type art. The barrel-chested guys with the handlebar mustaches are really fun. The old, basically white-walled tires are really neat, too. The complexity of this game is pretty low. It's got a family-level appeal. You could play this with people at family get-togethers. You could play this game with like pretty well anybody. So it's just an easy game to get on the table, which is a really great thing for me because I have groups of people around me a lot, and not always are they gamers. So this is a chance to get games played with non-gamers or people who aren't typically people who game a ton. And the theme of this game is really fun. I think that this is a unique kind of theme. This is really why I think this game stands out. If this would have been a car racing game and used those same mechanics, I don't like if they would have tried to put NASCAR on it and have it be slipstreaming and then miles per gallon you lose instead of exhaustion or something. This game would have been just like, it's noise. It's in the pile of car games. But the fact that it's bikes, it does feel like it fits this kind of mechanic better. But then you put that art, that cool old art, like turn of the century, like old, like Columbian Exposition era, like World's Fair type art, with the cool like variable modular board setups, and then make this biking theme happen on it. It just adds up to be really neat. The makeup mechanism in this game, makeup mechanisms destroy games, and so this one has a really strong makeup mechanism in it. And so like I'm thinking of like Mario Kart, Mario Kart has like a really, really strong makeup mechanism in it. Like the computers get way faster when you get a big lead, and you get way faster when you're way behind. And this game does that too. And it kind of ruins things in most games. And this one, it's awesome. So I love how it keeps things tense and tight. So that makeup mechanism is actually really critical and really makes this game a lot of fun, because every race is tense. Every race ends up being that last pack of bikes is there, and they're going to zoom past at the end there, and you're going to win. And so now I'm going to break this down into my like basic rating categories, where I talk about who can play this game, who might be turned off by the theme, and then kind of just like how much fun, replayability, and basically the design and art, how that is. So you can see these on the screen here already. You can read them if you want to, but I'll just talk about them here for a second. Accessibility, most anybody can play this game. I think if you're old enough to understand how to count and do movement, you could play and then have some help from like someone who's kind of understanding the slipstreaming and the packs and exhaustion cards. It might be hard for you to like want to take exhaustion cards if you're like 6 or 7 years old, because you don't quite understand that. But I think as soon as you can understand the ideas of like, I want to stay with a pack and count, you can play. So I'm thinking like 8 maybe. Most kids can play this probably. The theme, I can't imagine anyone having an objection to a game about biking. It's just a really, really lighthearted, fun theme. I know there's games with like, magic or gore or stuff that like people don't like to play. This one, I can't imagine anyone not wanting to play it. The fun on this one is like a 5 out of 5. So I love racing games. So this is the most objective, I think, probably out of any of these categories. And if you don't like racing games, this one may not be for you. But if you like racing games, I own a few racing games. I own Downforce. I own, it's called Homestretch by R&R Games. And this is my favorite racing game right now. It beats those two. Even beats Downforce. I love Downforce. I think Downforce is amazing. This one beats it just because it's so tense every race. Everything's so tight. And I don't know. Racing games are really fun for me. And this is the most fun of them. And racing games to me, with my group that I play racing games with, they tend to have this thing of like, by the time we get close to the finish line, we are standing up, no one's setting, and we're screaming at the board, and we're going, come on, come on! And in Homestretch, you're just rolling dice, so it's totally random, and it's just crazy. In Downforce, at least you're playing cards that over the course of a game kind of balance, but there's a lot of like about blocking there, and you can be out of a race really quick in that game. This one, man, everybody is in this race until the very end, it feels like, in every race. And so it's just like intense, and you're hoping you get those right cards that you saved for the end of the game, and you probably will, because you're weeding so many cards out throughout. So like you may only have 5 cards left, and you hopefully saved like 3 of 7s for the end, and you were able to slipstream and stay with the pack, and then you burn that 7, and you hope that you pass everybody and get maybe 3 or 4 spots past the finish line and win, and that's just such a fun feeling. So the replayability of this, so many modular setups that you can do. You could make your own too. I mean, like the possibilities of making your own tracks. It's mostly aesthetics, because like the number of lanes and turns and stuff, it's like all the same number of squares. So it could all be straight if you wanted to. But the aesthetics of it make it just fun. And then those hills, the ups and the down hills, where you can burn exhaustion at different stages of the race, or not have the ability to use better cards to catch up when you're going up hills, that really does change the game up. And so I think that having those in different places and having different amounts of them really does change the game up a lot. And like there's cards that come in the box that I'm sure have been play tested and balanced, and those are really great to do. And basically then, but you could just like make your own setups if you want to. And I mean, they may be unbalanced or silly or whatever, but you can still have fun with it. So I think the fact that you get several setups in the box right away, and then the cards come out differently every time, I think the replayability of this is pretty high. You're going to play it a lot because it's quick. The games are really quick. So when you get this game out, you probably will play it 2 or 3 times if I had to guess, because it does take a little while to snap those boards together. And if I did have a drawback, it's that the setup for this game is a little bit, it takes a while. But to be honest, every time I played it, it's become like almost a competitive game to see if you can get the board together quickly. And so everyone's like trying to find the pieces and make this puzzle happen. And it's actually kind of fun to set up. So it does take a while to set up, but it's kind of fun. The design and the art I love in this game. It's just amazing. It's that cool turn of the century, World's Fair looking. I mean, like I keep saying Columbian Exposition because I'm near Chicago, and I remember the 1893 World's Fair, not personally, but like I remember learning about it and seeing art from it, and it just feels like that kind of art. I just love the design, love the art on it. It's just really well done. So I give it a 5 out of 5 on that. So I had some pretty high numbers on this overall. Right here, I've got some really high numbers. Let's go ahead and see where I put this one at. I wanted to give this one higher than a 4.5 even, but I don't give really higher than 4.5s. I've given one game a 5. A 4.5 is an excellent rating for me. And if I did quarter points, this one would have averaged out to 4.66, so it would have gone to 4.75. So very close to a really great game, like a perfect game for me. This one, the way how we do it at Board Game Mechanics is we don't put games in our Hall of Fame unless Jason and I both agree that they're above a 4 rating. But I can say that this game's accepted. It's in my Hall of Fame. I love this game, and it's my go-to racing game. A 4.5 out of 5. Excellent game. If you like racing games, or if you're looking for another like family weight game type thing, this is a really good choice, a really rock-solid choice to put this into the collection of games. 4.5 out of 5. Really excellent game. So if you enjoyed this video, please think about subbing. Please think about mashing that like button down there and giving me a like. And then also, if you like this, Jason and I, my co-host who has some videos on this channel as well, he's on a podcast with me. Basically, he and I just have some silly talk back and forth. We do it weekly, about a half an hour show. If you've got a commute or something that's really fun to listen to, you can find the link to that in the description down below here. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate it. And another great game from Stronghold, the Fortress of Great Games. So this one in that category of really great games from Stronghold. So they hit another home run here, I think. Anyway, I've been Joel. Keep gaming.